Thanks to those who contributed to the discussion, and while the new deputy leader of Fianna Fáil was terribly polite in his response, the net interpretation of what he said really is we're not going to do anything and we're going to let the free market decide. So Lola, who I mentioned earlier on, who's paying €900 a month more, that's what, 10,000, 11,000 euro a year more than she was 2 years ago, and she most certainly isn't getting 10 or 11,000 more in her wage packet. In fact, the real value of her wage packet will probably have dropped because of the rest of the cost of living hikes. No help for her. The free market's going to decide, the government can do nothing. And that story, Lola's story, is repeated for tens and tens and tens of thousands of working people. While the profiteers don't get a mention really in the Minister's response. The fact of profiteering by the vulture funds, who are creaming it. And something I didn't mention, but we should mention, is those vulture funds bought those loans at about 50% of their original value. They still charge the interest to the mortgage holder on the full value of the loan, but they got it at 50% of the cost, or in some cases even less than that. So it's win, win, win for the vultures and a crushing impact for working people like Lola and tens of thousands of others. And the government says there's nothing we can do. I also find it ironic. I mean, we are often accused, I don't know how many times I've heard this government accuse the socialists of being ideological. But I have never heard such an ideological response as the one we've just got. And an ideological response that bears absolutely no relationship whatsoever to reality. So the minister simply asserts that we couldn't possibly do this because the free market would be better, competition would be better. Now, self-evidently, competition isn't better for the tens of thousands of people who are being feasted upon by the vulture funds or the profiteering banks that we bailed out, that the Lolas of this world bailed out, and that every working person in this country bailed out. We were able to interfere with the market to prop up the banks that had failed. No problem there. No problem with distorting the market to prop up the banks. But the Lolas of this world have to take it in the neck. And tens of thousands go into arrears. Some end up not being able to sustain their mortgage repayments and lose their homes. Many more will do absolutely anything to pay off their mortgage. That's what most people do. They will do anything, but their quality of life absolutely hammered. While these profiteering banks and vulture funds that we bailed out are making profits. It's win for them, win-win. No matter what happens, they win. And what's also interesting is the claim that, no, the market has to set the interest rates. We couldn't possibly have an administrative setting of interest rates. What do you think the European Central Bank is, other than an administrative setting of the interest rates? That's not the free market. It's an institution set up by states that sets interest rates. So it's done all the time. The European Central Bank, not exactly a democratic institution, but an institution set up by the member states of the European Union, does administratively set interest rates. So the idea that we couldn't set interest rates to the benefit and to protect mortgage holders, ordinary working people, is a nonsense. The truth is that the priorities of the European financial institutions and governments are to dance to the tune of the banks and of big business interests. That's the reality. So no, the banks must be protected. We will intervene on their behalf, but we're not intervening on behalf of ordinary working people. The Minister also failed to respond to the fact that some states do set interest rates, reference interest rates, and do not allow lenders to depart beyond a certain amount beyond those reference interest rates. It is done in a number of countries in Western Europe, as we outlined, and there's no response to that fact. So it can be done, it is being done, but the government responds by simply trotting out ideological, formulas which bear no relationship whatsoever to reality. And again, let me state the blatantly obvious. Any hope that competition is going to solve this problem has to deal with the reality that what we've actually seen is a reduction in competition without mortgage interest rate caps being imposed. Ulster Bank have left. KBC have left. And, the way they treated their customers, absolutely disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful, but they left. So even when you do everything these banks want, they move and make their decisions purely on the basis of what is profitable for them. They don't give a damn. Even though there were hundreds of thousands of Ulster Bank customers in this country who'd been with that bank for all of their lives, sometimes for generations, just up and gone, we don't care about the consequences, and we'll flog off your mortgage to a vulture fund who will pick your carcass. That's the reality. And I don't know why it seems so crazy to suggest that maybe if we are willing to, have shown ourselves willing to subsidise these profit-hungry banks, we couldn't do the same for ordinary people when there's a period where they're struggling, and that we could subsidise people. And maybe we could even subsidise them by reaching into and reducing the profits of those financial institutions when they are making absolutely an astronomical profits. Or even more radical, but we're not suggesting that today, although it is what I believe, we could actually have a banking system that ran on a not-for-profit basis. Is that such a crazy idea? Well, we do have institutions called the credit unions. It's possible, it can be done, to run lending and credit and financial institutions on a not-for-profit and democratic basis. We do it with the credit union movement. But we're not even asking for that. And the Minister essentially has no response on the vulture funds. No response. Do they serve any useful function whatsoever other than to profiteer? Answer, no. None at all. But we do nothing about them. We let them crucify people. We take no action against them. So even if you won't do the 3% cap we're talking about, could we do something to stop the rampant profiteering, where they're charging interest rates well in excess, even those of the pillar bank lenders, who, let's remind ourselves, in the case of AIB and Permanent TSB, are still majority state-owned, publicly owned. So I think it's a poor response from the government, and it's evidence that this government ultimately, it's not just us saying it, but when push comes to shove, the government goes with the interests of the banks and big business and corporate interests, and ordinary working people have to take it in the neck. That is not acceptable, and that is why it seems we're not going to get justice for ordinary people, mortgage holders in this case, but all the people affected by the housing crisis, the unaffordability of housing, the cost of living crisis, unless we get rid of this government and replace it with one that does put the needs of ordinary working people before the profits of greedy banks and vulture funds.